So we're going to be doing the basic SCR checks on a low voltage MX2 based soft starter. So this is an RB2 1S52 amp model. This is going to be applicable to any RB2 from 27 amps up to 96. So we're going to start with doing the really basic test of your L to T resistances. And now these should be all greater than 50k ohms. You can see we're getting about 850k, which is, I'd say, typical. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to check our SCR gate resistances. Now, I prefer to leave these plugged in. Reason being that if you're experiencing an issue, this is the quickest way to isolate it to a certain gate, because you could have an issue on the card. For example, let's say one of these diodes on the gate firing circuit is shorted, and if you were to measure with the SCR unplugged, as you can see, we get about 34 ohms, which is in spec. So let's say this was shorted, you would still have to go on and check this after. So the quickest way is to leave all these plugged in, and let's get this out of the way. And what you're going to do is you're going to take your probes underneath. Try to keep my hands out of the way for you. You're going to go underneath these bars or leads that come out the back of the connector. The reason for that is that the card is conformal coated, so it can be really hard to get a good connection. For example, if I try to go on top, it's not really working. Underneath, good reading. So that's important. Now, as you can see by doing it this way, we're getting between 8 and 50 ohms, I believe, as per the manual. Text should pop up confirming if I'm right or not. And that's pretty much all there is to it. So at this point, we've accomplished or qualified that our L to T resistances are good, so we don't seem to have a short across the SCRs, and our gate resistances are good, so we don't seem to have a failed gate. Now, what we're going to do is we're just going to do a basic visual inspection. On these models, always pay attention. You have to unplug this to open this cover. When you're done and you close this, do not forget to plug this back in. This is your CTs. If your CTs aren't plugged in, at the very least you're going to be changing some fuses, possibly worse. Because if you hit start with this unplugged, the starter will try to start, and it has no way of knowing how much current it's conducting, so it's just going to keep turning those SCRs on until it sees current or it trips out. Now, it's important when you do an SCR check to do a visual inspection. The reason for that is that the visual inspection is your most powerful troubleshooting tool, in my opinion. You're going to want to observe that there's no damage to the wiring on the SCRs. You're also going to want to pay attention to the gate wiring. Now, different manufacturers are going to use different pinouts on the SCRs. So for example, on these, you can see the pattern is white, red, white, red. Now on some other manufacturers, it may be white, red, red, white. They're always a twisted pair together. However, the actual pinout as it goes into the SCR can vary. Now, when you're changing SCRs, to work around that or to make sure you don't make that mistake, always follow the wiring diagram that's going to be on the side of the SCRs. Now, another thing to note is that the red is the cathode on the SCR, which is directly connected to either L or T, depending on the SCR. The white is the gate, which is what triggers the SCR. Now you're going to want to take close attention to these spade connectors. You're going to want to make sure they're on there tightly. If the SCRs have been changed multiple times, sometimes these will become loose. And relatively speaking, there is a decent amount of current flowing through these when the SCRs are turning on. And if there's a high resistance, then it's not going to be able to turn the SCR on properly. If your SCR doesn't turn on properly, you're much more likely to short an SCR. Once again, once you're done your visual inspection, you've made sure these are tight, you've made sure it's wired correctly, we've done our resistance checks, you can close it back up, not forgetting to plug your CT wires back in. That's probably one of the most common mistakes that I see. It's easy to overlook, especially if the wire has memory, you know, it's used to being in this shape. So it can flop back in like this, and you don't notice until it's too late.